Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be going over Chapter 6 of Johnston's Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners. This chapter is titled, Is There Something Special About Reasoning? What is reasoning? So reasoning is a verbal response. It is behavior. And Johnston says that we should not give reasoning any sort of special qualities or powers. It's a verbal response. It's verbal behavior. There's nothing. It's not a special kind of verbal response or behavior. And Johnston lists these 5 different factors that prompt us to say that verbal behavior involves reasoning. So the use of propositions, premises and conclusions, logicality and rules, deductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning. So I will talk a little bit more about each one of those. So we'll start with propositions. So the definition of a proposition is anything that we know, believe, think, judge, or assume. They connect tags or labels with words such as is. So an example would be the dog is black or the cake is chocolate, stuff like that. They mention the relationship between a noun, so in this case dog, and its properties. So the color of the dog is black. They're effective if they are believed by the listener, and they're ineffective if they're not. So it doesn't really matter whether they're true or not. If for them to be effective, all they have to do is convince the listener that they're true. Premises and conclusions. So certain premises are more likely to be believed by a listener if they are given in a specific sequence. So this is a good skill to have if you're a lawyer or if your job involves any kind of convincing someone of something. So what they would say, what they would recommend is that you give the known facts first and then lead up to your conclusion. So everything's kind of relatable, but if you were to just go out and state your conclusion, that may not be as believable as if you were to first list some known facts that are more likely to be accepted and believed by your listeners. If you list those first and then you get into your conclusion. So an example would be if you're a lawyer and you have this client that you need to defend for whatever, you might want to start off by listing all of the good things that the client has done in their lifetime, and then conclude that there's no way he could have done such a bad thing, so whatever he's on trial for. So you might want to list all the volunteer work he or she has done over their lifetime. You may want to mention that they have a family that loves them, friends that love them, coworkers that love them, things like that. And then you can end with there's no way that he could have done this. But if the lawyer just went straight out there and said, nope, there's no way my client has done this bad thing, the jury might be like, well, I mean, I guess that could be true, but they're more likely to believe that statement if they have all those facts first. Logicality and rules. So rules are sometimes formed from tacted behavior patterns. So an example of that would be the rules of grammar that we all use in the English language. And rules typically come from describing consistent patterns of behavior and events. They are used as a way to control the way people behave. But although this is their goal, a behavior analyst would say that behavior is controlled by the history of our consequences. They wouldn't say that behavior is controlled by rules. So even though many rules have specific consequences, if the rules are broken, a behavior analyst would really still want to highlight that behavior is controlled by our consequences. It's not just by the rules alone. Deductive reasoning. So these are the best known set of rules of logic, and 3 examples of rules of deductive inference are conjunctions, disjunctions, and implications. So I'll talk a little bit more about those 3. Conjunctions relate to propositions with the word and. So if the sentence has the word and in it, it's likely to be a conjunction. An example would be, it's cold outside and it's snowing. So if the listener believes either of those 2 propositions, they're more likely to believe the entire conjunctive proposition. So if the listener believes that it is cold outside because it's winter and it's Virginia, then they're more likely to believe that it's snowing. However, as we know, just because it's cold outside does not mean that it is also snowing. So you have to be careful with those. Disjunctive propositions, they connect to propositions with the word or. So an example would be either the cake is chocolate or it's vanilla. If the first part of the sentence is believed and the second part that negates the disjunct is believed, then it's likely that the listener will believe the entire statement. But of course, it's not always the case. And implications, they also connect to propositions. They're usually in the form of an if-then statement. So if the animal barks, then it's a dog. And if the listener believes the first part, they're likely to believe the second. But again, you would need to be careful because there could be a parrot that's imitating a dog and is barking, and that wouldn't mean that the parrot, even though it's an animal and it's barking, it doesn't mean it's a dog. Deductive reasoning. So it's important to remember that conclusions that resulted from deductive reasoning are not always true. An example would be that you may say that if the cat is orange, then it can't be your cat because your cat is brown. But someone could have dyed your cat's fur, so probably not common, but it's possible. So you just have to be careful. Inductive reasoning. So along with deductive reasoning, it's also defined behaviorally. It's defined based off of patterns of verbal behavior that tended to result in the listener believing whatever statement that you're saying. An example would be Mill's method of differences. If thing A occurs only when thing B occurs, there's reason to believe that thing A and thing B are causally related. Behavior analysts' approach to reasoning, Johnston would say that reasoning, it's all verbal behavior and it's not a special kind of verbal behavior. So that's really the point of this whole chapter. That's what he's really trying to knock into the reader's head. So my discussion question, well, it's not really a question, it's more so of a participation thing. I would like for you to give an example of an argument using premises and explain how that argument may be disproven or misleading. So don't use the examples that are in the book because we've read it. We know how they can be disproven, but come up with your best argument. It doesn't have to just be one sentence. You can make it a few sentences, make it a whole huge argument. And then let's talk about how they can be disproven or how they're kind of misleading. And my references page. All right, thanks for listening. I hope to hear from you all soon.